Joy of my salvation, you restore, you restore. Strengthen me, Lord, when the cross is too heavy. Give me courage to pray, for it is you I long to obey. Yeah, through the tears there is a joy that surrounds me. Through the pain there is a love that has found me. Through the tears there is a joy that surrounds me. Oh, oh,
All right, I'm here. Sorry. I was over there on the foxhole chatting with Sort of Michael, so almost forgot to hit my button. Hello, welcome everybody. This is Bill Donahue with Discerning Truths, and this is my Friday streams. And for any of you that are just dropping in, okay, first time listeners or whatever, I stream Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and what do you call it? At about noon Pacific time, right? Normally Monday and Wednesday I'm in a book. Right now I'm in the book of Philippians, and then on Friday I try to do things associated with Christianity, but stuff that I don't think you'll ever get taught in church. And then on Tuesdays, I got another card I haven't fixed. On Tuesdays I join Neil. She starts around 10:30, I thought I had corrected it on all my broadcasts, but here it's still showing up as 10:15, 10:20, 10:25-ish. I kept teasing Neil, and she's finally she's been pretty consistent about starting on 10:30 Eastern time. So, but that's what I am and where I do and where you can find me is I have email is my best shot. Bill at discerningtruth.com. And if for whatever reason I don't see your question in the chat or I miss some comment or you think of it after I go off the air, just email me. I will respond to you. And like I said, all my wow, these are really old, these slides. I haven't upgraded them. Okay, so for whatever reason I ended up with old slides on this introduction. But I do drop PDFs of what I'm doing and Telegram after I'm finished. And you can always catch me there. And I always promote my good friend Michael Beatty in California. Michael is God has really added to his gifts, made him a wonderful Bible teacher. Doesn't do the depth I do, but his it's more like church in the morning. Has little worship music. Some of the people call it their sacred space. Little worship music, Psalm, proverb of the day, and then short Bible study. Right now he's in Joshua, making Joshua interesting, which is not an easy thing to do. And then you have on Wednesday he prays for the nation, and on Sunday morning his wife Linda joins him and they go through the Psalms. And like I said, he does that every week at 5:30 a.m. Pacific time. So with that, I'm going to get into the study, and I put this as my my opening slide, my slide that's up there, a piece of imagery advertising it. And I asked this thing: is there biblical evidence that Paul went on at least one more missionary journey after the Book of Acts closes? The Book of Acts closes without really a solid ending. It talks about him being in a house for 2 years and seeing whoever comes. But it just kind of abruptly ends. And then I put a bunch of cities up here. And then, he was, of course, in Rome under house arrest. Then you got a bunch of other cities over there: Philippi, Nicopolis, Corinth, Crete, Miletus, Colossae, and Troas. And saying, did he visit these cities after being released from the Book of Acts? And that's really what I'm going to be looking at. Now, I also threw in what is Barcelona and Seville, Spain. Those are not mentioned in the Bible at all, right? But there is some credible evidence that Paul went there, so I did that. I left off the stuff like, did Paul go to Great Britain, because I dealt with that in the earlier stream, right? And I'm really focusing on the biblical cities for right now. And what I wanted to have, this slide has Paul's known and his missionary journeys that are recorded in Acts. And it's going to be hard to see on this. You'll see it better on a PDF. But he's running around what was Asia Minor, Turkey, Greece, the Middle East, up in what would be Israel and Lebanon, and moving up that way. And then he finally, in chains, on the bottom trip, comes by Crete, the island in the middle of the thing. This is on his road. He's in chains on his way back to Rome. They shipwreck in over by Malta, and then they end up going up into Rome, and that's his journey back to make his appeal to Caesar. And that pretty much is where the Book of Acts ends. But Paul's still alive, and there's good historical evidence that he didn't die for another at least 4 years, and 3 to 4 years after this. So we just want to see, what did he do? Did he just stay in Rome for an additional 3 or 4 years? Did he go on another missionary journey? Was he released? What's going to happen? And I did touch on this subject. Like I said, I did a stream. It's my stream number 242 called Acts 29. And that really looked at a highly questionable document that I suspect is a forgery, right? But It's called the Sinene manuscript, or the 29th chapter of Acts. And I looked at the question as whether it's authentic. And like I said, I didn't find the evidence for authenticity sufficient, but we did find a lot of corroborating evidence, the idea that Paul was released from his house arrest after the book of Acts closes, and that he did go on at least one and possibly several missionary trips after that, and that he did make it to Spain, which he talks about wanting to go to Spain through the New Testament, especially in the book of Romans. But today's stream, I'm gonna take a closer look at hints not from some outside source, with the exception of Spain. Those are our outside sources, right? But in the Bible, are there hints that suggest this is true? That Paul went on this extra journey. And then, without somebody like Luke making a detailed record of where Paul went and where went and when after the close of the book of Acts, it's impossible to lay out any level of certainty Paul's travels. In what order did he visit the places in question? Okay? He could have gone directly from Rome to Spain. It's not that far. Or he might have returned to churches and people he thought would support that journey and gone back to those churches first, collected money to make his journey to Spain possible. Or maybe he never went to Spain. Right? But this is what we're looking at in the study. And this is a quick overview, kind of bullet point thing. Paul, and we know in the Bible that Paul set up Titus over the island of Crete, but the only record of Paul even stopping at Crete is on his journey to Rome as a prisoner, and that's in Titus 1:5. So when did he go to Crete and set up Titus over there? There's no mention of it happening in Acts, but in Titus, his letter to Titus, he mentions that he did it. When did that happen? Paul mentions the trip to Corinth after leaving Miletus, but no such journey is recorded in Acts, right? But it's mentioned in 2 Timothy 4:20, right? Paul went to Macedonia after leaving Timothy at Ephesus. We know that from 1 Timothy 1:3, but we don't find any corresponding itinerary in Acts that matches that. Paul requests that a guest room be prepared for him at Colossae after his imprisonment, and he's writing to Philemon in Philemon 1:22. It's only one chapter. You sometimes call it Philemon 22, but it's he writes to him and says, "Prepare a guest room. I'm expecting to come to you." And then, did he make it to over there? We're not sure, but then Paul says that he left his cloak at Troas and asked Timothy to leave Ephesus and bring it to him in 2 Timothy 4:13. When did that happen? There's no corroboration of that event, and it's hard to fit that into the timeline of Acts, when that could have been, And then Paul asked Timothy to join him in Nicopolis, where he plans to spend the winter, in Titus 3:12. Right? So where was Titus? And why is he coming to join him? None of that's in Acts. Right? Paul, writing from prison, refers to his first trial, either from prison or under house arrest. It's kind of hard to understand when he was still in a jail facility or when he got to Rome. Was he immediately in a rented house? But in that imprisonment, he refers to his first trial and indicates that it ended favorably in 2 Timothy 4:16. Well, there's no record in Acts of that trial having ended. Acts is written before it ends. So you can see it's difficult to reconcile any of these events with the detailed chronology provided by Luke in the book of Acts. Luke is very detail oriented. So how did he miss all this stuff? The logical answer is if these events occurred after the close of Acts, right? Then Luke would never have mentioned them because he wrote them, if they're after he writes the book. But if they happened before, we had a problem with a very solid historian in Luke, just missing a ton of details in his supposedly complete itinerary of Paul, telling you what port he went there, how long it took to get from this point to the other, who he saw. Acts is very detailed, but he missed it all. Now, there's other evidence outside of Scripture, and I went over this before in that other video, and I just want you to know. Clement of Rome, in about AD 70, Clement was one of Paul's companions, and he's mentioned in Acts 16:6-8. He wrote that Paul traveled to the farthest reaches of the West. Now, that's in Clement's letter called First Clement, and they got chapter and verse breaks in that letter like we have in the Bible, and it's First Clement chapter 5:5-7, and that was not an unusual reference to the area of Spain in the Roman Empire. So there are people that think he went even further west than that, but at least that's a pretty common reference in the time to the area of Spain. A Muratorian canon manuscript, that's a fragment, okay, of a manuscript. It's estimated to be dated around 8180, says Paul went to Spain. Cyril of Jerusalem, another early church father, AD 315-386, says Paul went to Spain, right? John Chrysostom, AD 347-407, says Paul went to Spain, okay? Many other ancient Christian writers asserted that Paul went to Spain, including Jerome. Jerome did the Latin Vulgate version of the Bible. Eusebius, writing about AD 325, supported this with his claim that Paul's martyrdom was not during the period described in the book of Acts. That Sunni manuscript, which I'm telling you I don't think is authentic, but if it's authentic, it supports Paul not only going to Spain but also to Britain, right? And then the government of Spain in 1963 issued a postage stamp commemorating the 1900 anniversary of Paul's arrival in Spain. There are monuments to his arrival in Spain. There are churches dedicated to his arrival. There's all kinds of evidence on that in that country dedicated to Spain, especially in Barcelona and Seville. Okay, so it seems fitting. Paul's the greatest letter writer of all time. I mean, most of the New Testament are letters from Paul, right? So why wouldn't you issue a stamp to the greatest letter writer? And they did it as a commemoration of his 1900 years. So their position is he got to Spain in 63 AD, which is consistent with him having been released from prison. Okay. Now, the old name for Barcelona is Tarragona. Sometimes you'll see this spelled a little differently, Tarragona, but it's Barcelona. And there's a monument to Paul in the tradition that he preached there. Also on the other extreme of Spain, in the village that used to be called Ecija, which is now Seville, there's a monument marking the place where Paul supposedly preached. Okay? These people built monuments to the fact that he was there. So they either built monuments to something that never happened, or they're actually marking something that happened. Paul is considered the patron saint of Ecija. And for years, baptisms were done in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Apostle Paul. And I don't think that's a proper formula for a baptism, but it tells you that at least culturally, they believe Paul was there to establish Christianity. Now, one of the suggested routes for Paul's visit is that he entered Spain near Barcelona, okay, and passing down the coast to Cadiz and then back to Seville, Cordoba, Merida, Saragossa, and leaving again at the port of Ampias or Emporis on the coast between Barcelona and the French border. But we only have solid evidence, really solid evidence for Barcelona and Seville. The rest of the route is speculation. But there's nothing in the Bible that indicates Paul went to Spain, that he ever made it, right? And I'm putting this map up again that I had on my title slide because I want you to understand. The 2 cities in Spain marked, no biblical evidence supporting it. It's all extra biblical evidence. But from Rome eastward, all those cities that are marked in red, there's evidence that Paul went there after the close of book of Acts. And that's the evidence we're really going to focus on, right? So let's take these cities one at a time, okay? Now, in Philippi, Paul's future seems to still be in some question, but he tells the Philippians, and I'm in this book right now, so we're dealing with that Paul says, I'm coming, but even if I don't make it, right? I'm confident I'm going to make it, but even if God lets me die, right? That even if kind of, he's always qualifying. So it's clearly not divine revelation telling him he's going, but he believes. It is clear from his letter that he believes from his circumstances that he's going to be released, right? And in Philippians 2:22-24, it says, but you know Timothy's proven worth, how as a son with a father he served with me in the gospel. I hope, therefore, to send him just as soon as I see how it will go with me. Paul's still unsure how his future is going to turn out. And I trust that the Lord will shortly, that shortly I will come also. So Paul's hedging his bet a little bit. He's not saying, thus saith the Lord, I'm coming to you. But Timothy's in Rome, not in Ephesus at this point in time, right? Timothy's in Rome with Paul, and Paul is saying, I'm going to send Timothy to you, right? And I hope to come later, as soon as I find out what's going on with me. So that's a hint that Paul fully expects to go to Philippi. Colossae, when Paul writes to Philemon, he mentions his imprisonment in Rome. So logically, he's either still there under house arrest or it's an experience in his very recent past. But it's at least past tense. In Philemon 1, 10, and 13, he talks about that. And Paul was clearly making plans to travel to Philemon's location. So either he had been released or was expecting to be released soon. And he asked Philemon to prepare a guest room for him. And that's Philemon 22 or 122. Like I said, there's only one chapter, so depends on how you want to label it. It says, at the same time, prepare a guest room for me, for I am hoping that through your prayers I will graciously be given to you. Okay? That's an expectation from Paul that he is soon to be able to travel, right? Now, it's generally believed that Philemon lived in Colossae. And Paul's letter to the Colossians, Onesimus, how do you, Onesimus? I butcher these Greek names like crazy in Hebrew names. But he's the slave to Philemon that runs away. And Paul writes a letter to Philemon. Most of Philemon is, don't take it out on Onesimus. I'm sending it back to you, but be a good person to him. And so Onesimus and Archippus, who Paul also greets in a letter to Philemon, are described as members of the church there, and that's in Colossians 4, 7-17. So if Philemon lives in Colossae, and Paul says, prepare a room for me in your house, I'm coming, that's indication Paul's going to Colossae, right? Little hints in Scripture. Now, none of these hints so far suggest that he actually made it. You got to go a little deeper in stuff. In Macedonia, which is part of Greece, it's the Roman provinces of Macedonia, right? It's in 1 Timothy 1, 3-4, it says, as I urged you when I was going to Macedonia, remain at Ephesus, so that you may charge certain persons not to teach any different doctrine, nor to devote themselves to myths and endless genealogies, which promote speculations rather than the stewardship of God that is by faith. Okay? When did this happen? Find this event. Find Paul leaving Timothy in Ephesus in Acts and continuing on to Macedonia. Didn't happen. But Paul's referring to this in 1 Timothy as something he read. And this is why some scholars don't think 1 Timothy and 1st, 2nd Timothy or Titus were written during Paul's imprisonment, but were written later while he's on these post-release missionary journeys. Ephesus is in the Roman province of Asia. Okay? Now, the Roman province of Asia is a good portion of what would be Turkey today. On Paul's third missionary journey in Acts 18:23 to Acts 21:14 describes his third missionary journey. Paul did travel from Ephesus and eventually arrive in Macedonia, but according to Acts 20:3-6, Timothy was with Paul in Macedonia on that journey. So when did Paul leave Timothy in Ephesus? Didn't happen in that story on the third missionary journey. Had to happen at some other time. And so unless Paul traveled from Ephesus to Macedonia on a different trip, and on that trip left Timothy in Ephesus, you got a conflict here between what Paul writes to Timothy in 1 Timothy and what Luke records happened in Acts. I don't think there's errors in the Bible. I think Luke records exactly what happened leading up until Paul's first trial, and that 1 Timothy is talking about events that happened after Paul was released. Now, Philippi, Thessalonica, and Berea, those are cities in Macedonia where Paul spread the Christian message. Okay? These would be European cities. Prior to that, Paul had been in Asian cities. Okay? Either Middle Eastern or the Roman province of Asia, Turkey. The first city in Europe that Paul preaches in is Philippi. He goes to Philippi, Thessalonica, and Bereans, right? They're all in Macedonia, where Paul spread the Christian message. And we've already seen that while under house arrest in Rome, Paul sent Timothy ahead of himself to Philippi to proclaim his intentions to go there as soon as he was able. And that's from Philippians 2:22-24, right? He tells them, I'm coming. But when you read this story in Acts, we have a different order, right? You don't have Timothy going ahead. You have Timothy coming with Paul, right? There's another Roman province called Achaia in southern Greece, okay? And I actually put up the Roman provinces in a minute so that be able to understand what I'm talking about. But in 2 Timothy 4:20, Paul says, Erastus remained in Corinth, and I left Trophimus, who was ill, in Miletus. Right? This is a clear statement that Paul had been to Corinth. He knew Erastus was there because he had first-hand knowledge, having recently visited the city. But it's mentioned in the same verse, it's reasonable to conclude that Paul had left Trophimus at Miletus, that occurred shortly after his leaving Erastus at Corinth, right? And it shows a continued move back eastward into familiar territory, not his westward journeys, which are what the book of Acts records. Okay? He's going from Macedonia down through Achaia, including Corinth, leaving Corinth, crossing the sea, and then going to, Miletus, which is in Turkey. Okay? So Paul and whoever was still traveling with them were headed north towards Nicopolis, where he hoped to meet Titus would join him. And you see that in Titus 3:12. The problem here is that Miletus is one direction from Corinth, while Nicopolis is in a very different direction. It is therefore difficult to make a sensible map from these passages without having Paul backtrack. And none of this fits Acts. None of it. Okay? So we don't know in what order Paul did what. But then Crete, Titus, it says, "This is why I left you in Crete, so that you might put what remained into order and appoint elders in every town as I directed you." Okay, and like I said, Acts 27, 7-38 records Paul's travel around Crete, but never mentions Titus being with him, nor did Paul leave Titus in Crete. So when did this happen? I'm suggesting you it happened after the close of the book of Acts. Now, Crete was said to be a place of the ministry of Titus in Titus 1:5, but the only known sites on Crete mentioned in the Bible are a harbor named Kaliolimenes, or Good Harbor, Fair Havens sometimes. I think the map calls it Fair Havens. And a nearby city, I think that's cut off. Laws. I gotta look up the name of that city. Oh, Lasea. It is cut off. Thank you. I didn't remember any city named Laws. It's Lasea. Both are referred to in Acts 27:8. Coasting along, it was with difficulty came to a place called Fair Havens, right? Okay, that's that harbor, which was near the city of Lasea. But this is not part of the record including above, which is Luke chronicling Paul's journey to Roman chains. So either Luke leaves out these important details about Titus and in his chronicles of Paul's missionary efforts, or Paul left Titus in Crete to establish the church after the close of the book of Acts. And I'm suggesting to you that that's it. Now, I keep talking about Roman provinces, and this map is helpful. Okay? So you can see, and it'll be easier on the blow up on the PDF, but the blue in the middle of Greece is Macedonia, right? And then Acacia is down in the green on the tip, and Corinth is down there. And then the end of Turkey is the pink that says Asia, right? And then you have Galatia, which is up in the kind of central Turkey, right? And then these are all the different Roman provinces that in the Roman Empire in the first century. And you can see Judea is the green on the eastern Mediterranean, and Syria is everything above it. So Lebanon and all that would be part of Syria, the Roman province of Syria, right? Arabia is the Sinai and everything like Jordan, most of what would, or a good portion of what would be Jordan today, and that is called Arabia because the rest of Arabia is outside the Roman Empire. So Paul is in there, and most of these journeys are right in the middle between Greece and Asia. And Crete's at the bottom in the middle of the sea, you can see there. And all of these cities are in that area. Luke details Paul's travels in this area and never mentions any of these events. This is a little bit crazy, right? I blew this up a little bit to try to look at like modern countries, so you can see how Turkey takes that whole area that on the last map was multiple Roman provinces. Greece is one area, multiple Roman provinces. They're described by the names of the Roman provinces at the day. In yellow, Crete, out in the middle of the island, is part of Greece today. It was a separate island nation, right? In the time. But all these islands, even off the coast of, in the Aegean Sea, off the coast of Turkey, are part of Greece. Okay? Borders change. That's why the Bible uses your historical names for countries and ancestral names, because your ancestors don't change. The historic name of what your country was doesn't change, right? And the Bible does that because it can't be updated with contemporary information as borders move back and forth, right? Now, the Roman province of Asia, which is part of modern-day Turkey, it's in Turkey, but clearly not all of Turkey, right? Paul appears to have gathered up a number of people who assisted him in spreading the gospel. And then he seems to be strategically placing them in cities. Sometimes after leaving Titus in Crete, Paul moves Titus to join him in Nicopolis. Paul tells Titus that he plans on spending the winter in Nicopolis, which is a city in the province of Achaia. This is part of Greece. Okay? In 2 Timothy, Paul mentions or alludes to people in moments that appear to be connected to his post-Roman imprisonment and travels through Asia, because none of these people or events are mentioned by Luke and Acts at all. Paul mentions having a significant dispute with some believers in Asia, including Phygelius and Hermogenes. Let me butcher these names. I'm sorry. 2 Timothy 1:15. That dispute not mentioned in Acts. Paul mentions having received help from Onesiphorus in 2 Timothy 1:18. No mention of that person or the help from them in Acts. Paul mentions having been with Capris at Troas in 2 Timothy 4:13 and 14. Again, nothing mentioned about that in Acts. Paul mentions being confronted by Alexander the coppersmith in 2 Timothy 4:14. No such confrontation is discussed in Acts. Paul mentions needing to leave Trophimus and Miletus because he was ill in 2 Timothy 4:20. Again, not even a mention of Paul having been to Miletus in Acts. Okay? The previous slides show what is called Asia in Scripture. It's the Roman province of Asia. It's a small portion of what would be modern-day Turkey. Paul spent a lot of time in that area they called Asia. In fact, he gets turned at one point because he's going to go to Asia, and he sees this vision of a Macedonian calling him to come to Macedon, and he changes his direction. Paul wasn't going to China, Asia. He was going to the Roman province of Asia, and he got turned around. Now, we know from Scripture that Paul had a deep desire to preach in Spain. We see it in Romans 15:22-9. And after being released from Roman house arrest, he could have easily sailed westward. Right? Clement of Rome says he went there. The Muratorian fragment says he went there. Cyril of Jerusalem, John Chrysostom, all say Paul went to Spain. So we got a guy that says he wants to go. We have hints in the Bible that he did at least one more missionary journey, maybe several missionary journeys. There are records in some of his letters talking about events that are not recorded in Acts. All of those are biblical hints, like following a little treasure map, that tell you that Paul was released. History says, and I point this out, that Paul's letter to the Philippians is written very likely in 63 AD. The persecution from Rome hadn't really started. I mean, the Christianity was a nuisance to them prior to that. When the fire in Rome happened in July of AD 64, Nero blames it on the Christians, and then the persecution of Christians starts in earnest. But the persecution of Christians accelerates to a certain point, and it's not until about 150 AD that it really takes off. Most of what you read about Christians being burned at the stake and stuff happened closer to like 300 AD, right? That this persecution went on for more than 150 years, from about 150 AD on. But there was still sporadic persecution from the time of Nero up to 150 AD. But in 63 AD, it wasn't happening. And that's why we have the Philippians in their letter, and I've tried to point this out. They're living a good life. There's not enough Jews there in the city to be a big problem for them. Paul had to go outside the city to find a place to pray because there's no synagogue. And the implication is no synagogue in Philippi. You need 10 Jewish males, adult Jewish males, to form a synagogue. So that indicates a very small Jewish population in that city. So the Jews are not persecuting him. The Romans are not persecuting him. A lot of the residents of Philippi are retired Roman soldiers and stuff, and people that haven't. They've been given exemption from two major taxes in the Roman Empire and been given Roman citizenship. They are living the blessed life. And Paul writes to Philippians to tell them, don't make your joy contingent upon the blessings you receive in this world, because cheer up, saints, things are about to get real bad. Now, I don't know if God showed Paul that it was coming, or if Paul's being there in Rome let him look at the situation and see the handwriting on the wall that persecution was coming. But he warns them times are going to change and they're going to be persecuted like he is. And he tells them, get your mind on Christ and do this. And that makes sense in the context if Paul is later released. What's happening, and that Paul would go later to the Philippians and go back to Colossae, the lukewarm church, right? Laodicea is right next to Colossae. Go back over there, support them. Sorry, coughing less than I was, but still having a fun time with this cough, and trying different things. I haven't tried the fire cider. I did hear about it, but I haven't tried it yet, and we'll go from there. But I just want you to understand that this is the internal evidences in the Bible that support the idea that Paul got released. The historic evidence is that Paul and Peter and Paul weren't killed until 67 or 66 or 67 AD. If Paul's writing Philippians in 63 AD, you have 3 to 4 years of Paul's life unaccounted for in Scripture, unless these hints in Scripture tell us about that Paul was on other missionary journeys. They're just not being chronicled by Luke because he doesn't need to. Paul's not under arrest and awaiting trial. This is why I tell you, don't check your brain at the door when you read Christianity. Now, I was talking with Sword before coming on the air while the song was playing. He discovered John Lennox and has been playing him on his channel and different stuff. And I said, men like John Lennox, deep thinkers in Christianity, very smart people in Christianity, I get a lot out of. I read a lot of people that way smarter than I am. Makes me nervous when I disagree with those people. It's like Alvin Flanagan and William Lane Craig. I consider them scholars way above my pay grade. I disagree with them on a number of issues, but it makes me sit back a minute and I re-look at my own positions first to make sure I'm solid. I said, if I'm going to disagree with somebody that's this smart and this much of a deep thinker, let me make sure I have all my ducks in a row. And John Lennox is one of those guys where he has that kind of thought. People listen to him. And then I compare people like Lennox or Alvin Flanagan or William Lane Craig or Daniel B. Wallace or, Bruce Metzger and all these other just amazing scholars in Christianity. And I compare them to what is taught in the church, generally popular teaching in the church. And they're night and day. These scholars are looking at stuff like these hints in the Bible and have concluded that Paul went on at least one and possibly two more missionary journeys after he got out of Acts. And I don't mean to imply that John Lennox has said anything like this or that Dan Wallace. I'm just saying this. Scholars that look at this, they look at these little hints in the Bible and they go, there's plenty of internal evidence. We have historical corroboration for some of these things, right? It fits with the timeline of history. We think it is therefore likely that this happened, more likely than not, that Paul did go on these missionary journeys. And that's exactly the way I approach Scripture. Right? Don't check your head don't check your brain at the door. Right? Come in and think about it. Read what it says, and then ask yourself questions. Okay? And when you read something in First or Second Timothy about an event, go back to Acts and find it. And when that event's not in Acts, you got to ask yourself why. Because the critics will tell you it's because the Bible's in error. I'm telling you, I don't think the Bible's in error. I think the Acts was written in defense of Paul. Luke and Acts were both written in defense of Paul and Christianity to the guy they are addressed to. Both are addressed to most excellent Theophilus. If Theophilus is either a Roman official or a lawyer handling Paul's case, then Luke writing Luke and Acts to him is basically legal briefs in support of Christianity, and that Paul was not doing anything for which he should be on trial by the Roman government. Then there's no reason to expect that they're going to conclude events that happen after that trial, because that's not the purpose of their writing, right? So it doesn't surprise me at all. So with that, I'm going to put on a song. I'm going to try to go through the different chats, see if there's anything I can answer, and then I'll be back here. You know, I always play Walk Through the Fire as my the song that I took from Michael. Well, he gave me. I didn't steal it. He gave me Walk Through the Fire. And it's my theme song. You recognize it. But he did a video with Walk Through the Fire, and he played it this morning at the end, the close of his study. And it just reminded me of just how good this video was. But in the original video, maybe you'll be able to watch it and see why it spoke to me. Okay? Oh, I had my mic on the whole time. I'm sorry. Hopefully, I wasn't making too much noise in the background. So, next week, this beautiful lady and I are going to Maui. I'm still going to stream, okay? God willing. As long as the Wi Fi in the hotel works, I'm going to bring my laptop and I'll stream. But we haven't been to Maui in years. And we used to go to Lahaina, and Lahaina's gone. So, it's kind of going to be interesting to go back there and just kind of see that. We're going to spend a week over in Maui, and I'll be back. But I plan on streaming on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday next week. Hopefully everything works out. But it's just we have an opportunity to go. I gotta take it while it's available. So and then I plan on being on with Neil. I haven't heard anything to tell me that we're not gonna do that with Neil. And yeah, I see your comment thinking pretty about you couldn't sleep because Knees was playing in your head. I love Knees, especially Michael on the piano. I mean, I like the upbeat version of it too, with Andrew Krause's backup singers, but the one on Knees is just worship. It's Michael worshiping, and I really like that one. And then Singing Pretty says she's going to play a movie tonight if she's available. Movies are not. I'm not usually there for the movies because I'm working, and I'm usually typing and stuff and not sitting there watching films. But Singing Pretty always has a good stream, great chat, and you go in there, and then sort of Michael is now behind a subscription requirement, but he always has it when he's online and speaking. I really like what Sword has to say, and we're here. So just support each other, and thank you, Beach Mama Mermaid, for the gift and the subscription. That was very nice of you. And with that, I'm going to get out of here, and God willing, I will be back here on Monday, coming to you from Maui.